If this never made you uncomfortable, this isn't for you. If you've never had someone go quiet around you, not angry, not emotional, just gone, then you probably won't understand this. But if you've ever replayed a conversation months later and thought, wait, they knew, didn't they? Then stay. Because there is a specific type of mind that pretends not to know, not to avoid responsibility, but to watch something far more revealing happen. And once you notice it, you'll never feel safe around silence the same way again. Aquarius doesn't react the way people expect. They don't interrupt. They don't confront immediately. They don't rush to correct behavior. In fact, when something feels off, Aquarius often does the opposite of what most people do. They step back. They go quiet. They let things continue. And from the outside, this looks like indifference, like emotional distance, like someone who doesn't care enough to speak up. But that interpretation misses something critical. Because Aquarius usually already understands what's happening. They're just not interested in stopping it yet. Here's the first uncomfortable truth. Aquarius is not observing you. They're observing what happens when no one interferes. Most people assume silence means ignorance. Aquarius uses silence as a removal of influence. Because the moment you intervene, you contaminate the outcome. The moment you remind someone of the rules, you give them a script to follow. Aquarius doesn't want performance. They want to see what people do when they think they're free. So they pretend not to notice. They don't react when boundaries are tested. They don't comment when something feels slightly wrong. They don't step in when they could. And that's when the real behavior begins to surface. At first, it's subtle. Someone takes a little more than they should. Someone speaks slightly more disrespectfully. Someone bends a rule just enough to see if it snaps. And Aquarius notices all of it. But they say nothing. This is where people get it wrong. They think Aquarius is slow to respond. In reality, Aquarius is waiting for a pattern to complete itself. Because one moment doesn't mean much. 2 moments raise suspicion. 3 moments reveal a system. Aquarius isn't interested in excuses. They're interested in consistency. And consistency only appears when you believe no one is watching. Here's where the tension starts to rise. Most people assume morality is something you prove when challenged. Aquarius believes morality is something you reveal when unchallenged. Who are you when no one corrects you? Who are you when silence gives you permission? Who are you when you think there will be no consequences? Aquarius watches that version of you very closely. And this is why people feel betrayed later. Because from their perspective, everything was fine. No warnings. No objections. No conflict. So when Aquarius suddenly pulls away, people panic. They ask questions. They want explanations. They want a conversation to fix things. But Aquarius doesn't fix what has already been revealed. They don't confront to change you. They observe to understand you. And once that understanding settles in, there is no urgency left. Only clarity. This is the first mini-climax most people never realize happened. The moment Aquarius decides they've seen enough. It doesn't come with an argument. It doesn't come with anger. It comes with a quiet internal shift. From investment to observation. From closeness to distance. And by the time you notice something has changed, the evaluation has already ended. Here's where the story turns darker. People often accuse Aquarius of being manipulative. But manipulation requires steering behavior. Aquarius does the opposite. They remove themselves as a controlling force. They let you choose freely. They let you act naturally. And then they accept what you show them. That's not manipulation. That's radical exposure. Aquarius believes people deserve the freedom to reveal who they really are. Even when that truth ends a relationship. Even when that truth is ugly. Even when that truth costs them access. This is why Aquarius doesn't warn you that you're being tested. Because the test only works if you don't know it exists. The moment you know, you perform. And Aquarius has no interest in performance. They want reality. This creates a dangerous imbalance. Because while you think nothing is happening, Aquarius is collecting information. They notice who respects boundaries without reminders. They notice who escalates when silence is mistaken for permission. They notice who only behaves when authority is present. And they notice something else too. Who feels entitled to forgiveness once caught. This is where many people fail without realizing it. They assume that if a problem wasn't addressed immediately, it wasn't serious. They assume silence means tolerance. They assume access is permanent. Aquarius never assumes permanence. They assume systems reveal themselves over time. And once the system is clear, they adapt accordingly. No drama. No speeches. No emotional closure. just a recalibration. This is why Aquarius can seem terrifying in hindsight. Because they don't argue to be understood. They don't need you to agree. They don't need validation. They simply adjust their behavior to match the truth they've observed. And the truth they observe is often uncomfortable. Here's another rise. Aquarius doesn't punish people. They reclassify them. From trusted to monitored. From inner circle to outer orbit. From essential to optional. And the terrifying part? They rarely announce this change. You only feel it. The replies get slower. The warmth fades. The access disappears. And you're left wondering what you did wrong. But by the time you ask, the answer no longer matters. Because the decision wasn't emotional. It was structural. It was based on patterns, not moments. And patterns don't apologize. This leads to the emotional low point. Aquarius is often deeply misunderstood. Not because they don't feel, but because they don't process reality through emotional urgency. They process it through systems. How do you explain to someone that you didn't leave because of what they did last week, but because of what they consistently did when they thought nothing mattered? How do you explain that your silence wasn't apathy, but the absence of interference? Most people can't hear that. So Aquarius doesn't try. They let distance deliver the message instead. And distance, unlike words, doesn't invite debate. This is where the pressure builds toward the next climax. Because here's the part almost no one wants to admit. Aquarius doesn't believe people change because they're told to. They believe people reveal who they are when they're not controlled. That belief shapes everything they do. In friendships, in relationships, in groups, in society. Aquarius stands back not because they don't care, but because they care about truth more than comfort. And truth only appears when the spotlight turns off. So if an Aquarius ever seemed like they didn't notice, if they stayed quiet when you expected a reaction, if they let things slide longer than you thought they should, ask yourself something uncomfortable. What did you do with that freedom? Because they saw it, and they remembered it. And here's where it gets personal. Because at some point, the silence stops being abstract. It stops being philosophical. It becomes about you. There is a moment, often much later, when people start to feel it. A shift they can't quite name. Something is different. The warmth is gone. The enthusiasm faded. The access quietly closed. And that's when panic sets in. People start replaying old moments. They scan conversations. They look for the exact sentence where everything went wrong. But they can't find it. Because it didn't happen in one sentence. It happened across dozens of small choices you didn't think mattered. That's the cruelty of this kind of clarity. Aquarius doesn't end things on a dramatic mistake. They end things on accumulation, on repetition, on what you consistently allowed yourself to do when no one stopped you. And here's the part that hits hardest. Most people only feel remorse after they realize access is gone. Not when boundaries were being tested. Not when respect slowly eroded. Not when silence was mistaken for permission. Remorse comes when consequences finally appear. Aquarius notices that too. They notice who only becomes reflective once the door starts closing. And that observation confirms everything. This is where the second major climax begins. Because people assume that if they explain themselves, things can be fixed. They believe intention matters more than pattern. So they reach out. They apologize. They promise awareness. They say things like, I didn't know it bothered you. I would have stopped if you said something. I didn't realize it was that serious. But to Aquarius, these statements land hollow. Not because they're insincere, but because they arrive too late in the system. Aquarius doesn't disengage because you failed once. They disengage because you revealed who you are when no one corrected you. And no apology can rewrite that data. This is the moment people feel judged retroactively, as if they were evaluated without consent, as if the rules were never explained. And that's exactly why this hurts so much. Because deep down, most people know. They weren't confused. They were comfortable. Comfortable assuming silence meant safety. Comfortable assuming forgiveness was guaranteed. Comfortable assuming access was permanent. Aquarius doesn't share that assumption. They don't believe access is a right. They believe access is maintained by behavior, even when no one is watching. This creates a brutal asymmetry. While you were living in the present moment, Aquarius was watching a timeline form. And once that timeline made sense, they moved on internally, long before you realized anything was wrong. This is why their detachment feels sudden. But it wasn't. It was delayed visibility. Here's another rise. Aquarius doesn't argue because arguments are about perception. They care about structure. You can argue intention. You can argue misunderstanding. You cannot argue repeated behavior under freedom. That's why Aquarius doesn't try to clear the air. They don't need emotional alignment. They already have informational certainty. And certainty doesn't seek validation. This is also why Aquarius rarely gives dramatic closure. Because closure invites negotiation. And Aquarius isn't negotiating reality. They already accepted it. So they do the only thing that makes sense to them. They step away. Not angrily. Not loudly. But decisively. And that quiet decisiveness is what haunts people. Because there's no explosion to respond to. No villain to fight. No argument to win. Just distance. And distance forces reflection in a way confrontation never does. This is where many people finally realize something uncomfortable. They weren't abandoned because they were hated. They were abandoned because they were understood. That realization is far more unsettling. Here's the emotional low point. Aquarius often carries guilt for this. They wonder if they should have spoken sooner. If they should have warned. If they should have interfered. But then they remember something crucial. Every time they've interfered in the past, people changed temporarily. They behaved better while being watched. And reverted the moment attention faded. So Aquarius stopped managing people. They stopped parenting adults. They stopped enforcing standards externally. They decided to let reality do the talking. And reality is brutally honest. This is why Aquarius often ends up alone in rooms full of people. They're not disconnected. They're disillusioned. They've seen behind the mask too many times. They know how quickly ethics dissolve without supervision. And they refuse to build intimacy on illusions. Now comes the final climb. Aquarius doesn't expect perfection. They expect self-regulation. They expect awareness without reminders. They expect respect that doesn't require enforcement. And when they don't see that, they don't rage. They recalibrate. They move you into a different category in their life. One with less access, less intimacy, less influence. And that category is rarely temporary. Because Aquarius doesn't downgrade people emotionally. They downgrade systems. Once a system is flagged as unstable, it's no longer trusted. This is the moment people call Aquarius heartless. But what they're really encountering is emotional discipline. Aquarius refuses to override evidence with hope. They refuse to pretend something works when it doesn't. They refuse to stay close to structures that collapse the moment oversight disappears. That's not coldness. That's integrity. And yes, it makes them dangerous. Not because they manipulate outcomes, but because they don't soften consequences. They let behavior speak for itself. So if an Aquarius ever went quiet around you, if they ever acted like they didn't notice something obvious, if they ever stepped back instead of stepping in, understand this. That silence was not emptiness. It was space. Space for you to reveal who you are without interference. And whatever you chose to do in that space, they saw it. They logged it. They remembered it. And they built their future behavior around it. Not emotionally, structurally. If this made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort means recognition. It means you're seeing something you can't unsee now. If this helped you understand why someone disappeared without explanation, or why you yourself walked away without drama, then you already know how real this is. If you want more breakdowns like this, ones that don't comfort, but clarify, like this, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe. Because once you understand how silence works, you stop mistaking it for ignorance ever again.